Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I'm joined by Representative Angela Arsenault of Vermont, here to talk about screens at school. Welcome, Representative Arsenault.
Thank you so much.
You are a sponsor of an important bill in Vermont. It's called the Phone and Social Media Free Schools Bill. And just for listeners, there's two important sections of this bill. One, that all pre-K through 12 schools will support their students with a bell-to-bell phone-free policy that will state that students may not access personal devices from bell to bell. And then the second provision in the bill prohibits schools and school districts from using social media to communicate directly with students. And I want to get into both of those topics today, but we'll start with the phones and the devices. Why do you feel like it's important for students to be phone-free and device-free bell to bell?
Oh my gosh, I might say, why isn't it important?
There you go.
I think first is the importance of a distraction-free or, reduced distraction. I actually don't think we can get distraction-free, and that's okay. There's such thing as healthy distraction. It's okay to let your mind wander. And as you're going through school and learning how to cope with that when your mind wanders. But when your mind is wandering because you're pulled back into your phone or, other kind of device, smartwatch or what have you, that's a different type of distraction. That's a really, truly manufactured distraction that should not be present in classrooms because personal devices impede academic growth and, engagement. Equally important is what the presence of personal devices and we are talking primarily about phones, but there's more to it, do in terms of social cohesion and general socialization.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much to be said. I have two teenagers myself. They're 16 and 14, and both got a phone when they turned 13. If I had it to do it over, I don't know if I wouldn't make the same choice, but I've seen what screens do to the introduction of screens at a young age, and then the introduction of a phone, say in adolescence or teen years, and how quickly a young person, and let's be honest, even an adult, will retreat into their phone when they're feeling slightly uncomfortable or uncertain. And we have to teach kids how to push through those uncertainties and be vulnerable and reach out to people instead of reaching for your phone. And as long as the phones are there, designed the way they are, with the apps designed the way they are, it's nearly impossible to get a young person to choose that vulnerability over what they feel is relative safety. And we can get into the irony of that with the phone.
Yeah. And I think the phones have just gotten so much smarter and so much more addictive. Like, we didn't need this policy 8 or 10 years ago because flip phones and basic phones weren't calling out to us hundreds of times a day.
Yeah.
And I think that now we're layering on watches, which is included in the policy too, right? Smartwatches?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, because from what I've seen, a lot of parents are giving their kids watches like young, 4 or 5 years old, to get a hold of them in case of an emergency and track them. And that in itself, a lot of teachers are telling me, is a huge distraction in the classroom too.
I've heard that as well. And related to what you just said about, watches and being given at a younger and younger age. And the reason for that, it happened so quickly. But so many of us have come to think that we have to be able to reach our kids at any moment of the day. They have to be able to reach us. And I was on a panel recently in our community forum in our district, in my school district, where we are trying to go phone free. The administrators would like it, and there's been some pushback. But it was a student who said, I think we all need to redefine and take a look at what an emergency is. What constitutes a real emergency.
Right.
It was so great to hear her say this. She's a senior this year in high school. And And she was talking about how she's actually really proud that she's learned how to deal with certain anxiety-causing situations without reaching for her phone to text her mom.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that's really important too, that we're like cheating our kids out of realizing their potential in terms of resiliency and persistence and what they can
Mhm.
actually do on their own or with the help of the people around them,
Yeah.
because we're just accepting this notion that we have to
Yeah.
be reachable and be able to reach our kids at all times, and it's just not true.
Yeah, it all plays into this anxious generation, right? With because we're not giving our kids the ability to have that brain development that's really important when they feel uncomfortable or feel discomfort to sit in it and maybe access who's around them or access some of their own internal tools when they like we would, go straight to either your phone just to distract you from the feeling or to reach out to my mom, which I still do that.
Yeah.
But giving them access to it constantly from a young age has really been bad for the brain development of these kids and the development of those necessary skills.
Yeah.
I talked to a principal at Bullard High School in Fresno. I interviewed him last week,
Mhm.
Principal Tarigian, and he implemented actually 3 years ago a bell-to-bell phone ban with Yonder pouches, which for listeners, it's the magnetic
That is
pouches that,
huge.
yeah. So, yeah, kids can put their own phones into these pouches, have it with them all day, but they can't access them without a teacher opening them up. And Principal Tarigian said he came into the school as principal and looked around and no one was paying attention, no one was learning. Everybody was on their phone all day during class. So he fought that good fight and had a really hard time with the implementation because of all the pushback from parents. And I'm sure this is something you can speak to.
Mhm.
What's been the main pushback when trying to get this implemented statewide or even school wide from what you've seen? Yeah.
I would say that the two most often heard sentiments in terms of pushback are: one, we need to teach kids how to use these tools responsibly. Technology is not going anywhere. We need to help them prepare for the future, the present, and their future. And so therefore they need to have access to their phones. And I love that one because
Hmm.
I say you're absolutely right. We do need to teach kids how to use these tools responsibly.
Hmm.
And one of the ways that you can use a tool like this responsibly is to not use it sometimes.
Right. Right.
So put it away when it's
Hmm.
appropriate to have it away.
Yeah.
And and then I share that there's an underlying assumption in that statement that is incorrect, which is that the tools are designed for kids and
Hmm.
designed to be safe for kids, and we
Hmm.
know that is
Hmm.
not true.
Right.
So then I shift to other things we teach kids about without exposing them, to the harm of that product necessarily. So think about alcohol and other drugs.
Hmm.
Or, one that makes people really uncomfortable, think about sex education.
Hmm.
Do we bring sex into school? I mean, do we say that kids need to have sex in school to be able to know how to have responsible sex?
Hmm. Right.
Do we say kids need to try some drugs in school to know how to use drugs responsibly?
Hmm.
It just doesn't hold up when you think about when you learn about the addictive
Hmm.
design of these products, and that teaching responsible use does not have to mean unfettered access
Right.
in school.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. And then secondly, people raise the issue of safety quite often, and
Hmm.
that's super understandable. And, separately, we can get into how terribly unfortunate and really traumatic that is, that
Hmm.
we have students and caregivers worried about a school shooting or some other type of intrusion into the school environment. I want to validate that. It's really scary and terribly sad that we have to think about that.
Yeah.
And school safety experts tell us that kids are actually safer in
Hmm.
schools with bell to bell phone policies
Mhm.
for a number of reasons that I can go into if you'd like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that that can be a hard thing for people to accept and understand because in a worst case scenario, you want to have that potentially last minute lifeline to your kid. And
Yeah.
it's horrible that we have to think about that. But kids are safer when they're paying attention to the adults who are, in the building trying to keep them safe.
Yeah. And I mean, to go there a little bit deeper, one expert shared with me that in like the Columbine shooting, there's video footage of kids who are on their phones being targeted because the lights from the phones or the dings from the phones. So it actually brings more attention to your child to the danger their way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so with all the sensitivity to this is, of course, I would want to know if my kid's okay. I get that
Mhm.
too. But you're right. Every person I've talked to, including the principal last week in Fresno, say that even having parents rush over to the school causing chaos makes it harder for the police to do their job. So all of it is the argument for phones not being accessible in those situations until it is safe and then giving the kids access. The principal last week was like, cut open those, yonder pouches after everything's safe, like get to them and get to let your parent know you're okay, but wait until you're told that you can do so.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it actually, if you're looking for a segue, I think it even provides a segue to the social media part of the
Mm,
bill because the speed at which misinformation is spread on social media or can be spread on
mhm.
social media during an
Right,
emergency is
right.
another incredible challenge to school personnel and
Mhm,
first responders who are trying to safely handle any situation.
mhm.
Kids can be unknowingly sharing misinformation, potentially putting other students in harm's way, directing them to the wrong part of a building,
Mhm.
just to- totally unintentionally thinking that they're sharing accurate information and they're not. And since everything is in real time on social media and, it's not moderated or anything like that. Like there's
Yeah.
no control over the quality of information that's being put out there. It
Yeah.
just adds to the chaos and can be incredibly challenging for first responders.
Yeah. So, let's talk about social media for a minute.
Mhm.
Well, I guess before we get into it, how it's used at schools or affecting kids at school, how are you approaching it with a 16 and a 14-year-old? How has that been with your kids technically, legally being able to sign up without your
Right.
approval? How's that going?
So our 16-year-old did get, let's see, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok between the ages of, I'd say, 14 and 15.
Mhm.
Um, in quick succession and kind of like in our case, it was one parent saying yes, the other parent saying no, and
Mhm. Yeah.
I was the parent saying no. But
Yeah. I
um,
know. That's normal.
it happened, and
Mhm.
then and then in the 2 years between our first 13-year-old and our second 13-year-old,
Mhm.
I learned a lot more and held my ground, stood firm, and our 14-year-old does not have any social media
Mhm.
accounts, although I will say I say that, but then again, he does use YouTube Shorts, which I think is a version of social media. So,
For sure.
um, yeah, but beyond that, he does not have social media. And so, what's been
Good.
really interesting is I've had so many conversations with our 16-year-old, continue to check in with them regularly about how they're using social media, how it's impacting them.
Yeah.
And they actually realized pretty quickly that they were spending too much time on TikTok. It didn't make them feel good. They
Mhm.
downloaded another app to help them restrict their
'Kay.
use of social media.
Great.
And that app also told you how much of your life, like how many hours of your life you'd gotten back by your
Mhm.
reduced usage and things like that. And
Yeah.
um, so they've realized that they don't care for Snapchat. TikTok was too addictive.
Mhm.
Instagram is still a favorite. And interestingly, they use the DM function a lot, which is just fascinating to me. Because I'm like, you've got text message. Why
Right.
not just text? But
That's interesting because it's not like Snapchat, which gives you a snap score. So if you every day snap your friend, your score goes up and up
yeah,
and up, and that's the
yeah.
addictive feature. Instagram doesn't have that. So I wonder why they prefer to message on there. I guess just
Yeah.
consolidating their activity in one spot?
And they say it's more customizable, like the, interface, the user
Okay.
experience is different enough, like, you can't in iMessage, it's just, like, the blue box and the,
Okay.
white the clear it's all, like,
Mhm.
customizable, aesthetic
Yeah.
stuff,
Okay.
and just the fact that you don't need somebody's phone number to reach them, which we know is
Sure.
part of the problem. You don't have
Yeah.
to know someone that well
Yeah,
to
what's
reach
your
out on
Insta is what
Instagram.
they yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, and I think that the key is the conversations and checking in, because whether or not our kids have access, and you have one who does and one who doesn't, like, most kids sneak it or get access to it on their friends' devices or something, and so we have to be having conversations as we learn about some of the threats that they will be faced with on there. And, there's this whole movement to delay social media access. The Surgeon General in 2023 let us know that 3 or more hours on social media doubles our kids' risks of anxiety and depression, and calls for warning labels. And so there's more awareness and more parents delaying. But what I was so concerned about related coming back to schools, I surveyed parents who'd already given their kids access to social media. And the first reason, the highest reason was because they felt left out and all their friends were on it. So that makes sense. But the second most common reason was because a sports team or school related activity required it for communication.
Ugh.
And so I couldn't believe it, and I hear it all the time. For me, I'm like, "Okay, no way." Like, I'm gonna push back, but I guess parents are having trouble pushing back on it and making everyone move over to an alternative communication app. So, why is it so important for you to include this in the legislation?
I mean, maybe first and foremost for the reason that you just hinted at, which is that if we have, and hopefully we do have, a growing number of caregivers who are, just better educated. We know more now than we did 5 years
Mhm.
ago, certainly 10 years ago. And if there are caregivers putting forth the effort to limit, restrict their child's access to social media, or make sure they aren't accessing it altogether. And then we have a school, a trusted partner in our child's life, telling the child and the parent essentially, like, no, you need this, you need an account on, Snapchat
Mhm.
to keep up with what's going on the, hockey team or something.
Yeah.
That's such a dangerous portal to open. And
Mhm.
I really do believe that if schools and educational leaders and coaches truly understood the potential for harm through social media, that they would not choose to do
Right.
this.
No.
So I don't believe that there's any malintent or, on the part of our schools and educational
Mhm.
leaders, but there is this incorrect assumption or belief that, it's not great, but it's not that
Mhm.
bad, and it's really
Yeah.
handy. That's what you
Right.
hear. And I've talked to some
Yeah.
folks with who oppose the bill, and they say about this provision in particular, they say, yeah, but we need to meet kids where they are.
Mhm.
And I just always say, should they be there?
Right. Right.
Do we want to keep them somewhere where
Mhm.
they're actually not safe? And it definitely calls into question potential liability for
Mhm.
schools and school districts,
Yeah.
should harm occur.
Of course, and there are hundreds, if not thousands now, of school districts suing social media companies
Yes.
for increased expenses, for mental health issues, all the fighting and the amplification of issues at school. And so I find it just so interesting that schools who are suing social media companies then also are requiring kids use social media to
Hmm.
communicate. And I think it's interesting because platforms like Snapchat, they call themselves a messaging app because you open up to a messaging platform, but then you just swipe over and you're on an algorithmic feed from anything on Snapchat. And then you swipe over and they're recommending you to strangers and predators. And then you swipe over and you're on a map where you can see where everyone is around you. And so, I think that maybe people misunderstand that the primary use is a safe messaging platform, it's not. It's a
Yeah.
social media platform that connects you with predators and serves you
Yeah.
inappropriate content. So,
Yes. Very succinctly put. You use the word interesting, and that's like one of those times where you're saying interesting because what you really mean is like
appalling.
unconscionable.
Right. Yeah,
Appalling.
you're right. You're right.
um, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And the frustrating thing for me as a parent who now, has experienced an alternative, a different
Mhm.
app that is not by our definition in the bill is not a social media app. There is an alternative. It's not,
Mhm.
you can't say, well, there's no other way to do this. We need
Right.
and I know schools have said we can't control what our students will do. So if teammates on their own are saying
Mhm.
we are all gonna let's make a group chat in Snapchat.
Mhm. Right.
The school is saying, well, we can encourage them to use a different
Mhm.
tool, but we can't say you can't do that.
Sure.
Um, and that's the bill's not trying to say that you have to enforce
Mhm.
personal use, but we are definitely saying you, school,
Yeah.
district, coach,
Coach.
whomever,
Mhm. Mhm.
representative of the school,
Yeah.
teacher
Mhm.
in a classroom setting, you can't say you need to access this platform in order to, participate fully in a team sport or participate in this class, like
Mhm.
whatever the class may be, even if it's a class on social media content creation,
Mhm.
we're saying, find a way
Yeah.
to make this work without asking or requiring students to access this portal, this platform
Yeah.
to do their work.
What are one or two of the recommendations that you make for messaging platforms that aren't social media if a parent
Mhm.
is having this issue and wants to go to their coach or school and say we should use this instead?
Yeah. So the one that is used by our district that I have a little bit of experience with is Sports U. It's a very simple interface, and the primary purpose is messaging between, I'm added as a parent, my
Okay.
student is added as an athlete. You can create groups within that ecosystem where you could create a group that was just athletes, just the
Mhm.
students, and they could chat amongst themselves, but the chat will always be archived and readable and
Mhm.
by coaches could access it.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is another thing that schools should be thinking about.
Mhm. It's
um,
bullying in there or predation, like between coaches and teachers and students. Like this is
right, right. You
we
want to
can't have
have
them
something that you
communicating.
have a record of
Yeah, totally.
as a district.
Mhm.
So Sports U is one of them, and then I know there's that one called maybe the unfortunately named Team Snap,
Oh
which
god. Okay. Come on.
yeah. So I that's another one.
Okay.
Some that are not used just for sports purposes, but that
Okay.
are broader platforms that schools use. Something called Parent Square keeps coming up.
Oh, yeah, I use that one. Okay, great.
When I reached out to my son's coach, because my son was faced with this couple months ago
Mhm.
when he joined a team at school, that everyone's on Snapchat and they're making a group on Snapchat, and can I get
Mhm.
Snapchat just for this? And I was like, no, I'm
No.
sorry. I know
Mm-mm.
this puts you in a tough position, but no. And so I did reach out to the coach and just said, like, hey, if there's any way you can just
Mhm.
encourage the team to migrate to even a group text where it's just
Mhm.
phone numbers,
Yep.
or their email addresses are all Gmail based. You could use the chat function in Gmail, like
Mhm.
something that is school. That's like the school can access those if needed,
Yeah.
So
Right, right.
there are options.
Also, if I was in that position, I would probably message all if I'm on some communication with all the parents, I would say, "Hey, is anyone else concerned about this? Because I don't find it appropriate to be using for my child to be using Snapchat. Here are the reasons why. I have no shame when it comes to that stuff. I
Yeah.
don't mind being that parent. So, find another parent or two." And then it's sort of like, well, if we have two or three parents not willing to do that, and we have to find something else to
Yeah.
use.
Yes, and I'm lucky that I did have another parent
Good.
on who and reached out to me independently and was just like,
Mhm.
"Hey, did you face this?" And because I think she may be the mom of like the one other kid who isn't on Snapchat.
I
And was
know.
just like, what are you gonna do? And so she reached
Yeah.
out to leadership to school leadership as well. So
Okay, good.
yeah, helps to have allies.
Okay. So, let me know, where is this bill at in Vermont? And then I do have an update from a contact about where the same model bill, so a duplication of this bill, is at in some other states, which I'll share with listeners too.
Yeah, so as of Friday, because
Mhm.
we are still in session here in Vermont. We're a part-time legislature, and we are probably going till the end of May
Okay.
this year. And the bill is still hanging on. It did not make, we have a date in our legislature that we call crossover, when it was back in March, when bills usually have to get from one body to the other in order to really be considered for this session. So it
Mhm.
didn't happen that the bill did not cross over from the House to Senate or Senate to House. So I've just been fighting to keep it alive. And
Mhm.
the House Education Committee, just in the last few weeks, has taken a lot of great testimony on the bill. And there's potential there for the House to pass it. And then we would just have to pressure the Senate and hope that they would take it up. But there's
Mhm.
also a vehicle in the Senate Education Committee. It's the miscellaneous education bill. And
Okay.
they're discussing that this week. And a
Good.
few senators are, hopefully going to ask that it be added to that bill, and which would be a better process, and would give us a better chance of this bill passing this session,
Okay.
which is my hope. I would hate to see another whole school year
I know.
lost to phones in schools.
Yeah, and this is something, so for the states that have passed a bell-to-bell policy, we have Arkansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Virginia, North Dakota, Arizona, Indiana, Kentucky, New York, and West Virginia.
Mhm.
We have a number of states that have passed it just during instructional time, so not the bell-to-bell version, and then there are many more states, maybe a dozen or two, considering the bell-to-bell bill, and some have passed in one chamber and are, in the other chamber. So is this something that, because so many, and I'm new to understanding how laws work, but, like,
Mhm.
because so many states are passing the same bill, is that something then we can expect to see on a federal level, just to make it cleaner?
I mean, it's something that we could certainly hope for, but
Okay.
I hate to say this, I have so little faith of any real action at the federal level,
Okay.
for really anything relating to big tech. I just saw, I was driving yesterday, and there was a license plate in front of me, and not a Vermont license plate, and
Mhm.
it said, "While I breathe, I hope." And I was
Mm.
like, "Whoo," gave me a little
Mm.
chill, and I thought, like, all right, I'm gonna keep hoping,
Yeah.
certainly,
Yeah.
that we can see some meaningful action at the federal level, because
Mhm.
that's what we need. That's this
Mhm.
problem is so big that
Yeah.
it warrants, a full scale congressional action. But right now we're relying on states, and so anytime we can do what we've done with this bill, which is to start in a few states and share the bill, share the legislation, have it
Mhm.
introduced over and over and over again. That's another way to get to the same end, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so I wish I felt that it was likely, but
Signs are not pointing in that direction for the
yeah,
federal level, and we'll talk.
yeah.
So to kind of close up on this bill, I'm going to include a link for parents or administrators, whoever's listening, to grab the model language, and you can send it to your representative and ask them, tell them you're interested in this, you think it's a good idea, where are we at with it? I want to have a brief chat now about school issued tech, because a lot of the same issues that come up around phones at school is also a problem with school issued devices. Lots of issues with data privacy, distractions, predation, bullying. Are these devices even effective in teaching our students in comparison to hand to paper lessons? I don't think that on a federal level they're concerned about this, because President Trump issued an executive order
Oh, yeah.
going even further, requiring that AI education start in kindergarten, kind of along that lines of, like, We need to teach them how to use it responsibly. Apparently, at 4 and 5 years old is the appropriate age to start using AI responsibly. So what do you feel about this generally, about our sort of overuse of tech at school and the direction
Mhm.
we're heading?
Man,
I know.
I've heard this said, and I feel it's worth repeating, that no one ever no one was ever asked to prove that these products, that the introduction of education technology or ed tech was going to be beneficial for students. That it would
Mhm.
be, that there was a real educational benefit to um, to the introduction of ed tech. So we skipped that pretty major step.
Yeah, sure.
Granted, the pandemic kind of forced the issue in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
But now here we are we're still kind of at the dawn of AI. I mean, it's embedded in a lot of things that we don't realize ways that we're already using it and already exposing our kids to it. But
Yeah.
here we are at a bit of an inflection point, and we're making the same mistake again.
Mhm.
And it's really frustrating to see that. And so, as we were just discussing, the money involved and the power of lobbyists at the federal level makes it very difficult for us to slow this train down,
Mhm.
or stop it altogether. But we have to try.
Mhm.
And it may be at the individual caregiver level. It may be if you can work together as a community, as a school district. States will, I've got, I've introduced another bill that would address AI in
Okay.
education by an indirect way that would
Okay.
require all AI products and all social media products, actually, for that matter, to basically sign a user agreement with the state of Vermont saying that they adhere to, since we all have to,
Mhm.
agree to these terms. Let's
Yeah.
lay out our terms for the
Mhm.
products. I just read that Gemini chatbot, that Google is going to roll out its Gemini chatbot for kids younger than 13.
Yeah, I saw that.
And Meta, of course, is now saying, oh, we have such an epidemic of loneliness among youth. Like, you need a chatbot friend. Like,
So backward.
what is happening?
Yeah, I
And the
know, I
way that
know.
we are really ceding any sort of power or influence or control
Mhm.
to the companies that make these products
Mhm.
is terrifying, I think. And we should all be quite frustrated and
Yeah.
worried. And we can't, unfortunately, I don't think we can say it's just up to schools to put up the stop sign and say, no,
Mhm.
we're not going to adopt any more of this, because a lot of schools aren't well resourced enough to have the
Yeah.
capacity to research every product and understand the implications.
Mhm.
They're being sold these products by
Mhm.
very successful and practiced companies who are
Yeah.
making billions of dollars by selling their products and aren't going to
Mhm.
stop anytime soon. So they're highly motivated, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
it's going to take every one of us who has an interest in the well-being of our kids and all of our kids,
Mhm.
to say, hold on a minute, I'm not sure about this.
Mhm.
And if you're really not sure, there are a lot of places you can go to learn more.
Mhm.
Um, but generally speaking, I really appreciate the work of the National Education Policy Center and the paper they put out saying it's time for a pause
Mhm.
uh, on AI in education.
Yeah,
Um,
great. I'll share a couple other resources. And speaking about this with the Anxious Generation team and Jonathan Haidt, they're actually adding a fifth norm to their 4 new norms that is reducing ed tech, specifically in middle school and younger. And so we'll see more research coming out that they're analyzing now. Um, I have an organization on the side called techsafelearning.org. There you will find parent-facing resources. So what do I check on my kid's device? What if I want to ask for no YouTube access at school, or what if I want to opt out entirely?
mhm,
Give me a template for that. So parent-facing resources at techsafelearning.org. For schools, I've been pointing people to Emily Churkin, the screen time consultant. She's been working with school districts to help them adjust their policies to kind of scale back the one-to-one devices,
mhm,
reduce time on device. And I think also a lot of movement will happen with lawsuits. So I'm suing Seesaw, to be announced soon, which is an ed tech platform that had gathered thousands of pieces of content, videos, audio of my children without my consent, and stored them and potentially probably sold them or shared with third parties. So I think that's one way too, is I'm trying to get more parents to be like, okay, I can join a class action lawsuit.
Mhm.
It's no money upfront to me and just some of my time. And that will help to force change and kind of identify the gaps in the legal process of schools can't consent on our behalf for our
Yes.
kids' data to be taken and monetized.
Yeah, that's
So,
great. Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been very, I feel like in all of this, we have to take opportunities to lift up schools and districts that are doing it well when we
yeah.
find them. And I want to just share gratitude for my own school district right now. I got an email just a couple days ago. It was a couple months ago. I got an email saying Google is changing its terms of service. You now have to, you parent, you have to provide affirmative permission for your child to access certain Google
Mhm.
products.
Okay.
And that included YouTube. And
Oh, wow. So you got to say
uh,
no?
so I got to
That
just
never
not
happens.
give. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got
That's
I
amazing.
didn't give permission.
Yeah.
And then I got a follow-up email saying, the deadline has passed and you didn't give permission, so these products will be disabled on your child's
Oh,
Chromebook.
beautiful.
Um, and they went further, and I literally just
Oh
got a
my
chill. This is how much like
god.
this stuff does to me. Um, they went further and said, and even if you opted in for your child, if your child is in 8th grade or below, we've determined that YouTube is not safe
Oh, thank
for
God.
kids. And
Oh, Angela.
so we're not going to include that. Like your kid won't be able to access YouTube. And they said, "Look, you can't
What
see
is
it.
the
My
difference
hair is
between that?
look at those
So
goosebumps."
it's
Um,
so personal to me because the difference between that approach, like the understanding versus the hours I spent trying to convince my school that YouTube is not safe for my second and third graders, to the point where I had to check it YouTube shorts and be served a self-harm video and show that to them. And then they still didn't remove YouTube from the devices and told me that YouTube is the number one educational platform and that my children are required to be given these devices with all of these platforms to attend the school. Like,
oh,
it's just the
no.
gap in understanding across
The
school
gap in
districts.
understanding.
But it gives me hope to hear that your school district is fully in agreement that YouTube is not safe for kids because it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really, I was amazed and
Mhm.
surprised and to be so bold as to say like even if you gave permission we changed our and to say like we've learned
Yeah.
more in just
Right.
since sending out that initial email and a few months later saying actually and they mentioned like YouTube teachers can embed a link that will only
Okay.
show that thing that
Mhm.
the teacher is trying to show.
Yeah,
And
sure.
it will, that's different. I
Mhm.
do think that's different. So it's not to say your child will never see another YouTube video if they're in
Yeah.
grades, pre-K to 8.
Yeah.
But that's what I call responsible
Mhm.
use. There
Sure.
is a way to do this, and they've like figured out that way
Yeah.
instead of just saying like, no, we can't. It's too hard. So I'm
Me
so
too.
grateful that that is
Mhm.
happening, and hope that it can happen in a lot more a lot more school
I
districts.
love that they've taken the lead and been like, we are going to tell it. We've researched this. This is what's best for your kid. And parents are looking for that support. We don't have time. Most parents don't have time to do all this research. And then I bet some of these parents are like, oh, you do. If the school doesn't feel YouTube is safe under that age, maybe I should cut it back at home. So they're setting the standard, and that's going to help societally us all push back on the time frames and
Yeah,
the ages we give our
absolutely.
kids access. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yep. So
okay,
I guess explicitly shout out Champlain Valley School District here in Vermont for
thank
making
you.
that choice. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Anything we didn't cover that you wanted to get to on the bill or screens at school in
I
general?
I think I will just say in terms of the bill and the idea of forwarding model legislation for folks who are listening and are like, I've never worked on legislation or with a legislator. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
Mhm.
We are as state level representatives. We serve our constituents, and we're able to serve them for me, especially in Vermont, given our size, in a much more direct way. If you want to work with a legislator, reach out to them. Just reach out to them. It may sound silly to some, or like that's not a thing that happens. I know we don't have any staff here in Vermont. You truly are just reaching out to your legislator, and I know that won't be the case in most places, and there's that advantage to having a few people connected to one another who want to do this and will work with a legislator, because there is a great advantage to having a legislative partner, someone inside your state house, I think, who will be pushing, or more than one, ideally, who will be pushing to have the legislation picked up, and to get a hearing, testimony, and just to keep pushing it along. It really helps to have that partnership between constituent and lawmaker.
Yeah, I think let the lawmaker guide you. Like, you don't have to know that there needs to be hearings or, committee meetings, or you don't have to know any of that. Just bring this topic up with your representative.
Yeah, bring your passion, bring your curiosity, educate your legislator. I mean, and the same way you can do with your school board. I served on our school board for 6 years, and that can be a pretty direct connection as well. And sometimes it's just a matter of like sharing your concerns with those people, the people in those positions, and then seeing where they take your concerns, and just keep checking in. And hey, have you learned more about this? How can I support you? What can I do to help you move on this?
And the checking in, I think, is important. I have, I think, 2 school board speech templates, one for phone-free schools and one for like school-issued device overuse on techsafelearning.org. And I did give those speeches at my school board meeting, but I just found it hard because you give the speech, you have a specific amount of time, your timer goes off, they don't respond to you, so it's not a back and forth. So you leave feeling like, okay, did they even hear me? Do they get it? So I think the key is, which I did not do a great job about, I think, but is following up with their emails and saying, where are we at? What else can I provide you? Can we add this to a future board meeting agenda so we can discuss more deeply? That's important, because it could just die after that school board speech, I feel like.
Right. I mean, that can be a very daunting, it can be a sort of intimidating action to take, and maybe even more important is like, maybe you start with a letter or an email to a school board member, to the school board, and share your questions and concerns, and then you're working with you're sort of priming them to be hopefully they then are like, oh, should I maybe I'll look into this, and then they've got questions of their own, and so then you enter into a partnership rather than just trying to like waving in the dark and hoping someone like shines a light on you, and it can be really frustrating.
Yeah, working together is what I hear is the key. You're on the same team and supporting kids. Okay, Representative Arsenault, thank you so much for this time and all this information. I'm going to include lots of resources in the episode notes for parents and administrators and teachers, whoever's listening. Keep me posted on how things push forward in Vermont, and I'll keep that updated on the episode notes too. And thank you for all of your work protecting kids and passing laws to protect our kids and do the work that, we hope is being done on our behalf. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Nikki. I mean, this is, again, talk about working together, like everything that you're doing to talk with people and have them share their thoughts with you, and the way that you make that available and accessible to so many people. And it's so important. I'm a journalist by trade, and that's you're building this recorded record of this fight and the reasons that we do it. So I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you so much.